record this for our board members who weren't able to join us today so that they can watch it at a later date and potentially share it with our new board members as well. So I am going to keep my comments super short because I am really excited for us to hear from the panel. But you may recall that we've had a couple of opportunities to learn from some of our colleagues here at recent board meetings. We had some colleagues in California talk us through some of their trust-based philanthropy work they're doing there. More recently, we had a colleague in Florida talk about their place-based work, which I think was really helpful as we think about our own thriving communities work. And so now, as we think about starting our strengthening democracy work, we were really excited to be able to invite some of our partners to help us understand the landscape in civic engagement and civic participation a bit better, and to help us learn a little bit more about their work in this area. So we are so grateful that our partners were willing to join us. We have Sabina Mohideen from the American Muslim Advisory Council, as well as Tequila Johnson from the Equity Alliance, and Pratik Dash from the Tennessee Immigrant and Refugee Rights Coalition. And then moderating for us today is our very own Mattia Powell, who is of course one of our wonderful board members, but is also with Civic TN. So she'll be wearing dual hats for us today as she serves as our moderator. So with that, Mattia, I'm going to pass it to you.
Thank you, Samila, and thank you, Tequila and Sabina and Pratik for joining us today. So great to not only work with y'all all the time, but also to see you in this space and for you to get to share all of the great things that you've been doing for the last several years. And for Turk's case, you know, much longer than that. And Sabina's case as well. So I, wanted to just kind of set the stage a little bit about where we are and why democracy is really important to the work that we're doing at the Healing Trust. Really the systems that are holding up health disparities are completely aligned with the power structures and who wields this power. And Tennessee is in a place where we are struggling to make sure that everyone in Tennessee has a voice and choice in not only who leads them, but in those policy decisions that affect their everyday lives. We are at the bottom, and I'm not going to give numbers because it floats, but it's always at the bottom 5% of voter registration and voter turnout in the nation. We have some of the strictest voter registration, some of the strictest voting laws in the nation. We at one point in '96 we were considered 10th when it comes to ease of voting. By 2016, we were 48th. So, we went from being one of the easiest states to vote into one of the hardest. And it is directly reflected in the types of legislation that's coming out, and not just, at our state level, but even locally. I mean, we have 63, the Tennessee Justice Center put out a report, a poll that says 63% of Tennesseans supported the expansion of Medicaid, yet we cannot seem to expand it. And so I think when you see that, when you see these disconnects between what people, want out of their policy decisions and what they actually get, is a really clear indication that there are a lot of voices that have been ignored over this process. And so that is one of the reasons why Civic Tennessee was even created, is to make sure that all Tennesseans had access to, making sure that decisions are made, and the people that are making the decisions about their lives, they have access to influence those folks and have access to have their say. And we even have folks that will just, at this point in our history and in our laws, that will never have access. We have about 14% of BIPOC voters are ineligible because of various reasons. So, this is an issue, and it's an issue, and it's going to impact the work that we're doing when our communities cannot have say and voice and choice in who leads them. So that's setting the stage for this conversation that we're about to have. So first I'm going to allow each of our panelists to kind of introduce themselves and a little bit more about their organizations. And we'll start with Tequila, because she's looking bright in the yellow.
Hey, Matia. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having us. And really, I do want to say thank you to the board for you all really thinking about the strengthening democracy work and taking the time out to talk to us, but also really opening and expanding your minds because this work is very deep. My name is Tequila Johnson. I'm co-founder and co-executive director of the Equity Alliance. We are a nonprofit based here in Nashville. We refer to ourselves as a Black power building organization. For us, we believe that a lot of the change that we want to see happen in our communities happens at that intersection of political and economic power. And so all of our work is around building political and economic power. I graduated from TSU. I've lived in Nashville, I've lived in Chattanooga, and I've lived in Memphis. So I always say I'm a Tennessee girl, bred and buttered. So I'm here to stay and not going anywhere. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Tequila. Sabina?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Matia, and thank you to the board for inviting me and supporting our organization and really looking at democracy and advocacy as a part of the missions you want to support. So again, I'm Sabina Mohideen, the Executive Director of the American Muslim Advisory Council. We were founded in 2012, and that was a year after there was an anti-Sharia bill in the Tennessee State Legislature. So that bill directly attacked our community. Statewide, we estimate there's 65 to 70,000 Muslims. And so when this bill came through, they thought they would just kind of run it over us. We wouldn't be able to respond. But what they didn't expect is we organized and we fought back. And we won. But what we realized was that the mosque weren't in a position to really respond to Islamophobic attacks on our community. And that's why we started the American Muslim Advisory Council, to be that voice and for the Muslim community and advocate and push back against Islamophobic attacks. So our mission is to empower the Muslim community statewide and to foster mutual trust and respect among all people through civic engagement, community building, and media relations. And so civic engagement is self-explanatory, but when I say community building, I'm talking about work that we do within the Muslim community and then with ally organizations and other nonprofits and with governments. So that's a little bit about AMEC. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabina. And last but not least, Pratik.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks so much. My name is Pratik Dash. I am the political director at TIRC, the Tennessee Immigrant and Refugee Rights Coalition. I should obviously wear more yellow. I'm so glad to see Tequila. I think you look great in that yellow. Our mission is to build power, amplify our voices, and organize communities to advocate for our rights for immigrant and refugee communities. We've been around for almost 20 years now, and we've had some amazing victories as of late, including passing our first positive statewide legislation for immigration. Just last April, we passed a bill that would provide professional licenses for DACA recipients and asylum seekers, which means that our community members can be bartenders, architects, and the #1 career path that people are seeking are nursing. So we're trying to build some more nurses out there. And we also just received $1.8 million from Metro for Legal Services, which will help naturalize hundreds of Davidson County residents across Nashville. We've also worked with the DA's office to create a position with the backlog of U visas for domestic violence victims, which is one of the few pathways to citizenship for undocumented communities. But TIRC uses organizing, advocacy, and services to ensure that the immigrant community's voices are being amplified to find equity for all, regardless of the color of our skin, our religious beliefs, or where we come from. And I'm honored to be here today.
Thank you, Pratik. I think one of the things that sometimes when people hear civic engagement, they think specifically like voting and voter registration. And I think one of the things that we really figured out really quickly when we started doing this COVID work in particularly is that the same folks that have barriers voting are the same people that had barriers to vaccine. They had the barriers to healthcare. Like, it is all really interconnected. And so my question to you all is, how does your organization's civic engagement work support the Healing Trust mission to eliminate health disparities and advance racial equity? And Pratik, since you went last in the intros, I'll go first with you this time.
Yeah, happy to. My answer is a little bit roundabout, so please bear with me. I promise it'll be relevant. But I think it's important to note that for our community, civic engagement doesn't just start at the voter registration process. For us, like, we need to talk to our communities about becoming US citizens. So the naturalization process alone is like a long and grueling one, and it takes a minimum for 3 years for someone to naturalize, and it can even, for most of our communities, it takes more than 5 years. It's really important to note because citizenship is a pathway to better healthcare opportunities, as well as safety from immigration enforcement in this country. We tie all our voter work, we always have a tie into our health related work. So I'll give you all sort of an example. We've been doing a lot of vaccine work, COVID-19 vaccine work, as well as the other two panelists on this panel. But we invited a Congolese pastor to come get our church members vaccinated. And as they were getting vaccinated in our new building, we mentioned citizenship and voter registration during that 15-minute wait period. And these church members ended up staying, instead of 15 minutes, they stayed for an hour because they had so many questions and wanted to register to vote. And we registered 30 of them to vote or to sign up for one of our citizenship clinics. And so it's really like tying a lot of our civic engagement work into our vaccine work has been really powerful and exciting. And, you know, another great way that we're working is we're working with some immigrant-owned clinics. So Ahmed Clinic is a Muslim-owned clinic that many immigrant communities visit, and Faiza and her family, who are Kurdish refugees, we talk to them and train them on how to register people to vote. So we leave voter registration forms at her clinic, and she sometimes ends up registering folks and calls us and asks if we can pick up forms or things like that. And it works the other way too. Sometimes we register someone who we realize is not vaccinated and needs vaccine information too. And so it's very cyclical. It kind of goes back and forth, and they go hand in hand with each other.
Sabina?
Yeah, so one thing about the Muslim community in America is we're the most diverse faith community. And a lot of people don't think about it because Muslims have become a racialized group, and meaning it's anyone who looks Muslim is a Muslim, but you're talking about, you know, African Americans who have roots here for generations, but then you're talking about new immigrants or second or third generation immigrants. And we know like the Kurdish population was probably the largest group here in Nashville. So we're a very diverse group. And so when we work in different spaces, we're always having to advocate for resources for our community, because sometimes people think, well, if we're serving the immigrant community, we're serving Muslims altogether, and that's simply not true. And so, you know, working in the community, you realize that you often have to go from a faith-based perspective. You've got to be mindful of their Muslim identity and how that affects their interaction with other organizations, with the city, with government. And so that's a lot of the work we're doing, the advocacy work. And just like Pratik was mentioning with COVID, I mean, when COVID hit, really found ourselves pivoting and having to advocate on behalf of our community for more resources in terms of dollar, funding that was going to the usual culprits, the usual organizations, and saying, look, you need to focus on ours because we have specific needs and we have the reach to go into our community where these other organizations don't. So that kind of advocacy work for more resources, and then advocating for organizations to be responsive to our needs. So doing cultural competency training, trying to take away all the biases people have against the Muslim community, because Islamophobia is, it really affects how well Muslims can really integrate into the community and how children grow up and find an identity. So it's this advocacy aspect of our work that we're doing. And of course, it goes into health disparities, but it's just like whether it's making sure our children are needs are being met in school or in the workplace or with our interactions with law enforcement. That is a lot of the work we're doing.
Thank you. Tequila?
Well, they answered a lot of the questions, but I will say healthcare is a racial justice issue, right? We know that depending on what you look like, depending on what area you live in, you may or may not have access to adequate healthcare. So our work is all centered around racial justice. I do want to tell a quick story because I'm a visual person and I want you all to visualize how this work happens. There's a story that everyone tells in their organizer trainings, and I'm sure everybody here knows it. Maybe you guys don't. And it's about this crazy town where there were babies floating up the river. And so eventually there were these babies floating up the river and somebody realized like, oh my God, there are a bunch of babies in the river. So the town had got really, really adequate with getting the babies out the river. They were drying them off. Somebody would feed them. Then they would hand them to somebody else who would educate them. And somebody would make sure they had health care. But nobody stopped not one time to say, who the hell is throwing babies in the water? That is democracy work. Healthcare, education, all of those things stem from our democracy and the democratic process. And so when you talk about how our work ties into what you all are doing, think about those babies. Healthcare, alleviating racial justice and making sure people have adequate access to healthcare, it's like getting a baby out the water, right? And drying them off. These are things that as a democratic country, we should see as a fundamental right. The work that we're doing every day is to get everyday people to see that that tool, which is our vote, is a way to get access to healthcare. When we're on the doors talking to people, we're not saying, hey, you guys need to go out and vote, because research has shown us that that just does not work. We're talking about the issues that are at the forefront of what's happening in their community. So we're talking about expanding Medicare and Medicaid. We're talking about making sure that hospitals in rural towns aren't closing. We're talking about racial justice issues. We're talking about education. And we're using the vote. The vote is just the sledgehammer. But we realize in order to build something right, we can't just use a hammer, right? We need a nail. We need a nail gun. We need a screwdriver. And so when you think about the democratic process and you think about strengthening democracy as a holistic approach, right, to your work, which is all around healthcare, see it as a tool.
Thank you. And I'm definitely still in that baby in the river story. Oh, sure. Sabina, so let's talk a little bit more. I know we really kind of delved into, some of the things that you all are doing around, and how it all relates to the work that the Healing Trust and our Healing Trust mission and vision. But, and I mentioned earlier that everything is so interconnected. We talked some about voting and getting people to build power, but there's so many ways to do that before we even get to the ballot box, right? Like we talked about, Sabina, I know you worked on census because we all worked on census together and we worked on redistricting together. So can you talk a little bit more about some of these, some of these things that people sometimes don't even think about as being a part of democracy, but it's really critical to making sure people have their voice, they're counted, they have their voice, and how it all really connects to the important work that you're doing with your organization?
I see that one of the problems I have with the Muslim community is just a disconnect with how government and government systems work in our community. Are we a part of, part of this country? Are we a part of this democracy? Does our voice have an actual, is it meaningful when we do vote? And so people just kind of stay disconnected. So that work, and I'm sure, Tequila and Pratik does it too. It's like, you've got to build more awareness of the issues, and then you have to say, yes, you can do something about it, and give people some kind of hope of changing the status quo. So I think that starting with that education process, and like going back to the census, again, that's that disconnect. Like, you're saying you want to count me, but I don't see me reflected in how this democracy works. So why should I bother? Well, and how do you connect it and really talk about, wait, census kind of determines how resources are allocated. But if you don't see yourself there, it doesn't matter. So, going through those explanation, but, voting is like kind of, it's just one piece of the pie, right? And we know that taking those baby steps and being civically engaged in other ways kind of gets you to a place where, voting is no longer something you see as, should I do it or should I not do it, but I have to do it. And so it is having more, it is helping our community become more aware of issues. And like, so one of the other programs we do is like a Muslim Day on the Hill, and just connecting with a legislator and meeting an elected official. But what to me was even more important is saying, hey, this is the issue. Learn how to take a stand on that issue, dig a little deeper and know how this issue affects you, and then speak for yourselves. And so empowering people to speak for themselves, I think that is like one step. And then again, when I talk about understanding our community and the kind of the religious point of view in terms of who exactly is trying to get people to be more civically engaged, and understanding like the roles of Islamic institutions, the mosques, the imams have in pushing their communities to be more active, and being able to leverage their power within the community. And so again, with the Islamic, with the Muslim Day on the Hill, we're going to do candidate forums in the mosque, because again, we think that, it shows that the mosque leadership is backing this kind of work, and really supporting and encouraging their communities to be more civically engaged.
I really appreciate this, Sabina, and I think you called something out in what you said that is gonna set me up for a good question for Pratik. It's really kind of getting people, giving people educated and get them understanding how they can engage in this process, particularly when they've historically been ignored in this process and don't see themselves in that process. And Pratik, I know that that's a big piece of Turk's work, and they've been working to really kind of build these civic leaders. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, happy to. You are not the first person to call me Turk, so don't worry. I think for us, like, there's a real like leadership development program that we're building. When I was young, I have two immigrant parents that have fallen into the model minority myth. My parents were like, doctor, lawyer, engineer, that's going to be your career path, right? And I didn't even know that. I got very lucky that I stumbled into this. And so we want to create opportunities at Turk where young immigrant youth can get involved in this work and know that this is a career path early. We've trained 462 immigrant youth from 72 different countries to go knock on doors over the last 4 years. And I tell you, when we have like a virtual phone bank and someone is saying, hey, I have someone who speaks Vietnamese, can someone speak Vietnamese? And one other Zoom box is like, I got it, put the number in the chat. Listen, that's the world I want to live in. Like, it is amazing to see this like multi-ethnic, diverse group of immigrant youth taking over and moving things forward. And it's really cool to see, we've had some of our folks who have done such a great job and been in the spotlight so much so that candidates start to hire them and they want to be involved. And when candidates start to hire them, then they start saying, hey, you need to come to my church, you need to come to my mosque and talk to these voters. And it helps bring visibility to communities that are usually ignored by particular administrations. My coworker also always says this, and I stand by it 1000%. She says that no administration will save us. And I truly stand by that. I believe that it's our communities that will fight for representation and visibility and bring it to themselves. And so we really teach about it's not just, you know, trying to build power in the system. Like Tequila said, voting is one tool in the toolbox, but it's also helping them understand the holistic, the full toolbox of, you know, everything that we're doing on that front, from advocacy, from organizing to services, all of it. And maybe the last thing that I will say is, you know, I think that the other piece that we're doing, living in Tennessee and living in Nashville, you know, a lot of people, a lot of different groups, what they do is they try and mobilize folks to vote for president or senate and work their way down the ballot. We do it the other way around. We have to say, hey, there's this really important DA race. There's this really important school board race. Go into the polls, vote for that, and then vote your way up the ballot. And they're going to get news about up ballot. That's going to be on TV every single day. And people have made those opinions already. But those folks that make differences on their everyday lives, like school board, like DA, those are the folks that we need to make sure we're holding accountable in this city. Lastly, I will say that tomorrow night we are holding a school board forum. And so if anyone is interested, I'll put the link in the chat. Would love to have you all join us. It is an immigrant and refugee specific school board forum, and we're going to ask questions on immigration there. So yeah, kind of rambled a bit, but I think I covered most of the highlights with you.
No, I appreciate it. And it kind of set me up for a question for Tequila as well. So you guys are just kind of really leading me around in this conversation. And you mentioned, you know, about building leadership and also really the importance of, of this work not being transactional. And I think one of the things that Equity Alliance is really great at is movement building and really being and moving people, and the importance of like moving a collective. And really having folks, because I know we talk about this very transactionally, but ultimately what we want to do is people to be able to be empowered to, you know, to have policy decisions that really affect their lives. And all of that really directly relates to not just to the healthcare work. So Tequila, I would love for you to talk a little bit about how you guys move people in the movement building that you do in the work.
Sure. So I think when you think about the way and the why we do our work is culture, right? Everything that we do, we want it to be very culturally relevant, because most of the times when people see this word, they don't see themselves in it. And if I don't see myself in this work, I don't see myself in this process. And if I'm not in the process, I'm not at the voting booth. And if I'm not voting, then we're not going to get access to healthcare, right? Because the people who are voting are the people who feel empowered because they have the money, the resources, and the means to have a voice. So we really have to make sure that we're capturing people in a real and in a transparent way. And we do that through several ways. Point of privilege, like Pratik, we have our annual Juneteenth event coming up this weekend where we're there, upwards to 2,000-3,000 people. We block off Buchanan Street, and you may think you're just coming to kick it. You coming to party, eat a couple barbecue sandwiches, get your beer, whatever. But what you don't know is we are sprinkling democracy all throughout that event. And so my grandma had this saying, and she would say, you want to get people to do stuff, you got to put the medicine in the milk, because people are hard-headed. And sometimes people don't know what they need. And that's kind of how we approach our work. We don't just go and be like, oh, everything is so political. We do that. But what I've noticed over the last 6 years is when we do that, it's all of our friends there, right? People who are a part of the political bubble. So what we started doing is things like our Black Women's Brunch. Come, we're going to drink mimosas, we're going to turn up. And by the way, we're going to talk about why we don't have adequate health care in our state. We're going to talk about why Black women and the mortality rate is the way it is. And people feel like that is really a part of who they are. We have to make voting a culture. We have to make this as cultural as, Christmas, Juneteenth. It needs to be looked at almost like a holiday, right? I want to see times when families are like, oh man, it's election day. We need to grill out. Who cooking? We playing spades? What are we doing? It's an election day. And that's kind of the way we organize. And we do that, like Mattia said, through several different ways, but leadership development is one of them. If the people making the rules do not look like the people who are impacted by the rules or the policies, we're never going to get what we need. And right now, what you have is you don't have people controlling policies. You have dollars controlling policies, and you have dollars outvoting people. We can't outspend them. I love Healing Trust. I appreciate everything you're going to do for us, but it will never be enough. We will never have enough money. But what we do have is enough people. We outnumber them. And so we have to figure out, you go talk to your people in the way that they need to be talked to. I go talk to my people in the way that they need to be talked to. It is very, very relational. It is one person at a time, one vote at a time. It is hard. It is hard to track sometimes. And it is hard to show over time how it changes, because what we're doing is not just getting people to vote right. That's an end. What we're doing is a behavioral change. We're changing people's thought process. So that requires a lot of what everybody kind of said, and what Matia's hitting on is, we cannot just show up and be like, we want healthcare. Boom, give me 10 points. Like it doesn't happen like that. It has to be, and that's one of the things that I appreciate from you all, is this longitudinal approach to strengthening democracy. How can we work together to make sure that the things that you guys see as a board are weaved into the conversations that all of us are having at the doors? So I'll stop there because I can talk about this.
That was great. And I really appreciate all y'all's candor and thought. And we have some time, I believe, for questions, right, Samita?
So I think we're a little bit off schedule with the
Everyone.
agenda. So let me just make certain with Kristen, are we good?
You are, Samita. Yeah, we've got like 5 or 10 minutes. So if we've got questions, we'd love to hear them.
So we're good to go, Matia.
Okay, well, I am going to open the floor for questions if anybody has any.
Yes, Matia, first of all, I'd like to appreciate and thank you all for arranging this forum to have TEA and AMAG and Turk all together at the same platform. I remember back in 2020, we worked with Turk and AMAG together to do a census seminar. And Matia, you were also a part of it, where one of the younger attendees, he was, I believe, a 5-year-old kindergartner who was very, very worried that will he be counted in census if he's in detention. So the work that AMAC and Turk has put forward with their civic engagement, and then TEA comes along with registering voters, Tequila is 100% on spot. You have to get to talk to the people in the language they understand. And that language could be over a beer, over a sandwich, over a falafel, whichever it is, whatever it takes. So them organizing at that, like at the community level to inform the voters and reach the uninterested voters who think that politics has nothing to do with them, to help them understand that politics has everything to do with the air they breathe, the water they drink, the food they consume, and the price of the fuel they put in their tank. So this is not a one person's job. It's going to take a village, maybe more than a village. And these organizations like Turk, like AMAG, and like TEA, they are doing the hard work in the trenches. So my respect to all of you. Thank you for your work, and we will continue to help and support you in whichever way we possibly can.
Thank you so much. I also want to just like point out what you just said about, you know, some of the things that you lifted up. And I think there are a lot of people that just don't understand how they're impacted by any of this. They don't believe they have any power to change any of it. They don't believe they have the, you know they need certain things. They see the disparities in health. They see the disparities in education, but like they just believe that this is the way it is. And they don't understand what powers they have and how they even engage in a system to be able to try to change any of these things.
And
So, I was just gonna say, I
yes.
think what you heard from Sabina and Tequila and Pratik is, you know, what the links that all of our organizations go through just to get people to the point where they believe that they actually have any power in it.
And going back to Tequila's baby story that she shared, you know, we have to understand that we cannot expect different results if we keep voting for the same people over and over. And we have to tie these situations back to the people who are in elected office to say, hey, we need change. So the change can only come in when the public servant is different.
Any other questions? Thanks, Hannah. I just gonna make sure we have any questions. I don't know how much time I got, so y'all need to let me know so I don't mess up.
I think we're still good if there are any
Okay,
questions.
Yeah, can I add one more thing?
sure.
If we're waiting on, I just want to also add that part of what makes this work so amazing is working in coalition. And I think working in coalition is the only way that we can win. And so just want to name that, it's not just, Turk going out and doing its own thing. Like we've worked with AMAC and we've worked with TEA and other groups so that we work really hard to make sure that our power is visible and people know that we're standing together. Our elected officials may not respect just the immigrant community or just the Black community, but when they see us together, that's when we've seen elected officials start quaking in their boots and realizing that people of color are starting to band together, are starting to learn about these issues. Some of the most rewarding experiences that my canvassers have had has been working alongside Tequila and the Equity Alliance. And so learning how to incorporate anti-Blackness into a lot of our work has been, and fighting against that has been so critical as well.
Good point, Pratik.
Hey, Mattia, this is Kristen. I was just wanting to say thank you to Pratik and Sabina and Tequila. Y'all are amazing and just really appreciate y'all giving your time today. And then Pratik, actually, my question was gonna be something similar to what you just commented on. And y'all have all have very active social media presences too, which I appreciate because it keeps me up to date on what y'all are doing. But Tequila, actually, you said something a month or two ago, maybe about, just that it's not just about the Equity Alliance, that if folks have events that make sense for you, to let you know about it and that you will help promote those events. And I just really appreciated, I think, Pratik, to your point, that there's also a lot of cross promotion and cross collaboration between y'all in coalition. So just I wonder, Tequila, if you would say more kind of about, you've been through an election cycle, you're getting ready for another one. How, I know that resources are tight from staff perspective and all that. Oh, and I also just want to shout y'all out for giving your staff Fridays off last summer. My team was very inspired by that. And it's so important because this work is hard and burnout is real. So, you are really leading by example. So thank you for being a great example of giving folks time to rest and take that space. But also just how can we, with we only have so much energy and resources as people, how do we make sure that we collaborate effectively? And for us as funders too, how can we think about that better?
So I think, point of privilege, having Mattia on your board is amazing because that's what Civic TN does, is like make sure that we know what tools, because sometimes collaboration is about what tools are available to you, right? And Mattia does a great job at keeping us all connected. We need that hub that we can go to bounce ideas off one another, to share resources and things like that. So that is amazing. When I posted that about the events, it was primarily because I was looking at the shift in Nashville, and I'm on the industrial development board here, and we oftentimes talk about how development is impacting the city, but we don't oftentimes talk about how the city is not shifting the landscape of how we do the things that we do. And one of those things is just being together. Like, we're recruiting a lot of people from all over the country. And when you go to a LA, it's not uncommon to hear hip hop and then hear Spanish music and then hear country, everything is integrated. And so my thing was, how do we begin to start that process here in Nashville as a city that is not one of the most Black populous or minority populous cities in the South? We have a prime opportunity to begin modeling that. So that was kind of where that came from. And you asked, what can you all do as funders? One of the things that I loved about Healing Trust, I knew Kathy Self because I was a part of one of the discipleship ministries that she led. And she introduced me to Healing Trust because I one day came to her office and I had a complete nervous meltdown, like my hair was falling out and I was very, very stressed out. And she was like, there are resources for you to support you that I didn't know existed at the time. And so I think like with what you all already do, I worked with Sam. Sam actually went through one of our programs, and then we worked together on just getting some resources for organizers during the 2020 uprising. I never quarantined. I was protesting. Me and Pratik, we were out on the front lines every day. Then we were pushing people to, get vaccinated. And then it was one thing after another. And so having that space where I could say, here are some resources, go get a massage, go get therapy, because most of the organizations that do the work we do don't even have healthcare. They don't have insurance for their staff. So I think one of the things that I've been pushing funders to do is to radicalize the way you think about how the work happens so that you can radicalize your funding. And having a partner like Civic TN at the table is amazing because they can help move resources in a real way outside of what you guys are doing for us, but like pooled resources for sabbaticals or things like that. Mattia could be a great resource to get that information out, to get that out quickly. So I think you guys are really, in Tennessee, we did not get funding from not one funder in Tennessee until 2020. And by then we were already $1 million organization. So what you all are doing right now, I can't critique you because you all are trailblazing. In 10 years, when you guys look back as a board and you look at the impact that this funding is going to have, you're going to be proud.
Well, that's very sweet. Thank you, Tequila, for that. And just, we appreciate, we feel like we, maybe we're, we were working on this, but maybe not fast enough. So, certainly I want to also just, wish we had been there earlier, but I'm glad that we're here now. And please keep letting us know what we can do to partner and support you all, because like you said, yeah, you're out on the front lines. And I'm glad Kathy was there when you needed that support too. So she's been a great mentor to me and to a few of our other team members too over the years in a very similar way. So I appreciate that historical context. And we know how lucky we are to have Mattia on the board. She's a wonderful leader and colleague. So Mattia, I think we probably do need to wrap it up. It's right about time. So I'll let you do that. And just huge thank you from me and from Jose, who unfortunately lost his Wi-Fi connection, but sends his gratitude as well.
Well, I just want to thank everybody. Thank Pratik, Sabina, and Tequila for being part of this and just being part of all of the journey Pacific and just being always collaborative and working together. I will just say, just to piggyback off of what Tequila said, this work is really hard. It's almost impossible to do it by yourself. I mean, 2020 was one of the most stressful years I think I've even had in my life. And knowing that I woke up every day doing this work, but I had like so many other people that was trying to figure it out and do it too. Like that just gave me the strength to keep moving forward when it seemed almost impossible to do anything. And we figured out how to do so much. We figured out how to get people counted. We figured out how to get people vaccinated. We figured out how to get people to voting. We figured out how to do a lot of things and even just meet people's basic needs, and how we can help make sure that the money that was coming down through all the federal funds, that they were going to the right places. Like, we did a lot, and even though it was very stressful, and it's because we worked together on it. So I just want to thank all y'all for that and thank the Healing Trust for taking this journey. It is one that I think, we will be excited about taking and it is going to make a big impact.
Awesome. Thank you, Mattia, so much. Thank you, Tequila. Thank you, Sabina. Thank you, Pratik. Thank you, Healing Trust Board, for your time today too. Hopefully we'll see so much more of these folks over the next few years as well. And to the board members, we'll see you all in August, if not before. So I really appreciate it. Jennifer says, thank you so much for your work, and your candor, passion, authenticity moves this work. Absolutely. So y'all are awesome, and take care. And hopefully everyone got their Uber Eats vouchers. So please, if you haven't had a chance, self-care is also eating. So please make sure you get something to eat today on the Healing Trust. So we just really thank you all just so much. So Mattia, again, thanks so much. We'll see y'all soon.